Hey world, if you're
Here
just
we
hopping on,
are.
happy Friday.
It is Friday.
It's a beautiful Friday here in Fargo, North Dakota. Almost 80 degrees.
Woo. It's good. One more second here. Make sure we're good. It's been a few weeks, Ben, since we've had a Friday conversation. See if we can
It
knock the
has.
rust off of our. We are back, though. We're back after a couple good weeks of team stuff and some time off. So it's been good. Cool. Well, should we go after it? Let's jump in right away. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Well, hey, welcome everybody. Those of you who are checking us out either live or on the recording, we're actually shooting this one to our Facebook page, our personal profiles. Normally, what Ben and I will do is we put this Friday conversation in our private group. We just jump on for our network leaders, do some different conversations that we're having to begin to roll some of those out. But we want to expand that a little bit today because I think the topic's really good. In fact, I would say, I don't know if you'd say this, Ben, but I feel like that what we were talking about today comes up all the time in our coaching, with different
Yeah.
people. It's one of the tools that we probably use. I don't know most. I don't know about you. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I would say it's even within my own brain, it's the framework that I refer to most frequently in working with people. Little disclaimer though, it's not original to us. Don't want to take credit for something we didn't create. It was developed by an organization called 3DM, Mike
Yeah.
Breen, which, man, talk about their life shapes, which this is one of those, are some of the best tools for thinking about discipleship, especially if you're working with young adults, because we're such an increasingly visual culture. Their life shapes are all visual shapes that help illustrate basic discipleship biblical principles, and this is one that I always come back to.
Well, and I think it's so good too, because, one of the major conversations that we're having with partnering churches all the time is around the area of disciple making. But I think one of the challenges is there's a lot of misconceptions around what disciple making is. There's a lot of kind of broken definitions out there. People don't understand the full kind of scope of what disciple making, what it actually looks like, what it does. A lot of times they'll equate it with, oh yeah, we do discipleship at Sunday school or at small groups or whatever, which could be the case. Like, I don't want to say that that's not true, but I think that we need to kind of step back and have a broader definition of disciple making and what that looks like. And I think that this is just a great tool to utilize this. And what it's called is the Invitation Challenge Matrix. And it's a really good opportunity. So I don't know, do you want to jump in? Any kind of initial comments you want to make, Ben? Or should we just jump in with this?
One comment on the general idea of disciple making. I think if you are depending on a program, it's not discipleship. It's not disciple making. Like you mentioned, Andy, there, we'll default to Sunday school or a teaching series, or we plan out a 6-week class that we're going to take people through, and it's going to be in small groups, and they're going to eat a meal, and they're going to talk about these Bible verses, and that can be a tool to facilitate disciple making, but that is not disciple making. The disciple making piece is always going to be in a individual to individual, or maybe 1-on-2, 1-on-3, 1-on-4. The relationship piece is there. The program does not do the discipleship. The individual person does. So I'll share my screen here. We don't normally do this on Friday conversations, but this is part of a slide deck that we use when we're working with our partners through the stage 1 of the process and helping them think about how do we lay some foundtions for disciple making. So Andy, why don't you intro?
Yeah, so you're getting behind the scenes stuff right here. So this is
bonus content.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we want to talk a little bit just about the idea. There's really kind of 2 parts on it. There's the invitation side as well as the challenge side. And what Ben's going to do here in a few minutes is kind of walk through a traditional matrix of what it looks like for us to have high invitation, what it looks like to have low invitation, high challenge, low challenge. But let's talk about invitation. What do we mean by invitation first? And invitation is really just a sense where it's an invitation into relationship, right? So it's an invitation for either the example of Jesus or for us to invite people closer into relationship with us. So there's that passage there in John chapter 1. I'm not going to read it, but you can see it there where Jesus made a direct invitation to people of relationship, of like, hey, come and see, come follow me, come be a part of a relationship with me. And so part of discipleship, what we need to understand is about invitation, right? It's about pulling people closer into relationship, inviting them into the circles of our lives, into conversations, into life on life living. That's a part of disciple making as well. So anything we want to add on the invitation side there, Ben, before we go into challenge?
Well, why don't we, while we're doing definitions, let's maybe give a couple examples of what might invitation look like, right? We've got
Yeah.
this passage here is a good example of that in Jesus's life, where they ask him a question. They say, "Where are you staying?" And rather than answering the question with the facts of, "I'm going to the next town, I'm staying in this house," he answers with an invitation to a relationship. It says, "Come with me and see." So maybe let's flesh that out a couple more modern examples.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll give you some pretty simple examples, and I'll give you a couple, maybe a personal one or two for us. Invitation is just even a direct identification and of somebody that you're going to build a relationship with them, and then them um, engaging them in a consistent way. So where you're beginning
Yeah.
to engage in that relationship and moving forward. So you can think of things like, and this is where it could be like a smaller group or a DNA group or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think it's even can be some organic ways as well. Even for us, I've thought, and you've done this too, Ben, is even part of the invitation for our family and your family has been even people living with us, right? That
Yeah,
has been
for
a
sure.
way that we've pulled in people of saying, we're going to pour into you. You're going to see the nitty gritty of what it looks like to follow Jesus. So I think for even both of us, there's a very tangible way of allowing people space and beds and homes and in our lives to be a
Yeah.
part of engaging with our families.
That's the biggest invitation. I think a couple other examples, maybe on a smaller level, that you'll see practically. Invitation might look like you're having your college or young adult group gets together, and you notice someone, maybe it's the Holy Spirit prompting you, or maybe your attentiveness to someone's emotions catches, and you see, hey, this person is frustrated or struggling. Invitation might be like, hey, stick around for 20 minutes after. Let's talk about it. I feel like how you doing? Something like that. Or I mean, this one's a little bit self-explanatory, and it's inviting people into relationship and welcoming them, making them feel safe, secure, and connected, and like you belong as a part of this group, and I value having you in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. So invitation, that's a key part of discipleship, right? But the second thing we want to talk about is this idea of challenge. And challenge is this ability for us not to just invite in, but to step in intentional ways into spheres of people's lives, right? Where we're maybe seeing something or experiencing something that they may not be seeing. In a lot of ways, and you talk about this quite a bit, Ben, is sometimes what challenge is just kind of holding up the mirror to people, to allowing them to see some maybe things that they don't see about their lives, maybe some sin patterns, some deficiencies, some personality quirks that they may have. And the challenge is really about the ability for us as a community, as disciple makers, to step into those conversations and to be willing to be a part of the sanctification and the formation process of people as you begin to walk into. And so you think about Jesus doing this several times. You think about the disciples, you think about a lot of the Pharisees, where he would step into this sense of challenge, where he would call out something, where he would highlight something, where he would put a mirror in front of somebody and allow them to see a little bit about their lives that would be kind of maybe harder for them to see.
So here's an example of Jesus giving some challenge, right? This Luke 9 passage is saying, if you want to follow me, you got to take up your cross. saying there's a high bar that you have to jump, or in this case, I guess grace is lifting this over. If we're looking at the bigger
Yeah.
picture of the gospel, it's not a task that we have to accomplish, but there is a clear challenge that Jesus offers. Another biblical one would be Jesus turning to Peter, right? When Peter's saying, no, Jesus, you don't need to go. You don't need to die.
Get me
Jesus
behind me,
says,
Satan.
get behind me, Satan. That's a serious
What?
challenge right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's go. What have been a couple examples of challenge that you've used or seen, experienced?
Yeah. I mean, I think that these are just like seeing something and being willing to step into those conversations of sin patterns or habits that somebody may not see about their lives. And these are sometimes the harder conversations to have, but they're the ones that, and we'll talk about that a little bit at the end. Of there's a tendency sometimes for us to kind of gravitate towards one of these, but it's sitting down in coffee with somebody and just saying, hey, I want to, I see something, or maybe challenging them in terms of what you do see in them, right? Maybe you see something,
Yeah, it's a big
a
one.
gift in them. You're calling out a gifting or a passion that they don't see about themselves, and you're challenging them to take on more, to lead more, to be taking greater steps of faith. So it can be kind of on maybe a negative side, but also even a positive side of even challenging people by encouraging them forward and things. You got some examples on that one?
I think that's an important. I was going to make that same point, that I think a lot of times, right, we think of sin. We just talked about this within our community here on Wednesday night. That a lot of times we think about sin, that here's the list of rules, don't break the rules. But one of the primary biblical words for sin is the idea of missing the mark or falling short, right? Romans 3:23, all of sin and fallen short of the glory of God, the glory that God placed in us as image bearers. So I think a key part of challenging is saying, are you really being, I think in some ways the essence of challenging someone who's a follower of Jesus is saying, hey, are you reflecting, imaging forth the glory that God has put in you? You have the Holy Spirit in you. Are you living out of that, or are you living out of the flesh? So challenging people to be who they really are in Christ is a big one. Think of a couple examples. This can look in very small ways, like giving people responsibility. It may not be a direct, I'm challenging you for this. It may be saying, I'm gonna give them this opportunity as a challenge. I know it's going to be difficult for them. Other times it does look like, hey, we got to have this hard conversation. Let's have dinner and we'll talk over it. Can be an individual thing, could be a group thing. One other comment before I walk through the framework overall. Ideally, you would have a whole community of people who are mutually inviting and challenging each other. A lot of the times, though, if you're a leader, you're going to be the one who's going to have to lead out in this and begin with invitation and then move to challenge, which that's another key point here, is that if you look at Jesus's ministry and you can look experientially, and I think this is the way that God operates all throughout Scripture, is he begins with invitation. You don't begin with challenge, because if you begin with challenge, you push people away. The connection and relationship that happens through invitation precedes the challenge.
Yeah, it's good. Why don't you walk through that matrix there, Ben?
Yeah, so here's what the matrix looks like. We got, it's a square. We got two axes: high invitation, low invitation. And then on the horizontal one, low challenge to high challenge. So pretty straightforward, easy to remember. Here's what happens. If you get a culture that is high invitation, low challenge, it's a cozy culture that is going to produce consumer people. So Andy, what would be a couple examples of this kind of space, cozy and consumerist?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of like, I think a lot about even some traditional churches where we want people just to come and passively observe, right? And all the work is done by the paid professional who's on the stage doing something. And so you just come, you drink your coffee, you hang out, you just show up on Sunday, show up on a Bible study on Wednesday, and just participate. And we see, kind of that being one of the best pictures of what that looks like.
Yeah, entertainment industry, shopping industry, restaurant industry, those are all creating cozy cultures because that's what people want. We're paying money. We're trading our goods for services, our money for goods or services, so that we can feel cozy and satisfied. That's not the kind of culture you want to create. If you want to see disciples of Jesus, cozy culture is
Well,
antithetical
it
to
shouldn't
that.
be it shouldn't be.
Yes. Yeah. Low challenge, low invitation. That's going to produce people who are bored culture, people who are apathetic. That might be, you get like your high school, you get some class in high school. I definitely had classes in college where it's like, all you got to do is show up. The teacher's going to talk for an hour. And as long as you check the boxes, you get your grade. Um, and right, what happens in this kind of context is people become apathetic. They just tune out. They don't care if they have a reason not to come. They're not going to come. They'll find, and if they're there, they're not really there. They're probably only half there. They're on their phone. They're thinking about something else. Whatever. That's low challenge, low invitation. Yeah. Next one is where you start bringing high challenge but low invitation. So there's a lot of difficulty, a lot of challenge, but not much invitation to a relationship or support. Let's give them a couple examples of what this might look like.
I mean, this would be like inviting people to participate, in pretty high activities and challenging them with things, but there being an not much support or relationship to help them kind of process through where they're getting stuck, where they're struggling. So in the church side, we see this in maybe people that, are out doing ministry, but don't have the support, the encouragement, the prayer, the connections to help them move forward. I'm not thinking of any really.
I can think of I know I've had jobs this where you're like, here's your 20 things you need to do this week, figure it out. And I don't care. You just got to get it done and don't bother me with the challenges that you have. That's probably the point. There's probably good classes and stuff like this as well. Yeah. The quadrant we want to be moving people towards is that upper right one, the high invitation, high challenge, of discipling culture that produces people who are empowered. This looks like any healthy sports team that's doing its job well is going to have this kind of culture. There's going to be deep relationships within the team. They're supporting each other. But part of that relational support is also get better. We have a purpose, we have a goal, and we're moving towards it, and we're not letting you fall behind because as a team we're moving towards that. I've definitely been on missions trips where it's felt like that, where you got empowered people who are taking risks and stepping out together. And even if it's challenging and risky, there's a sense of safety and security because you have a group of people who have your back if it blows up. Yeah. Any other examples on that one, Andy?
No, I think that's good.
Cool. So that's the framework. We'll talk a little bit here about maybe what that looks like in use. I'm gonna skip down here. I think this is one.
Yeah, that's a huge one right there.
One other point to make. Here's the challenge, right? Most ministries by default end up with most people in the ministry falling in that cozy culture. For whatever reason, the church, by and large, I think this is especially true of college and young adult and even like youth group stuff. We've set stuff up to create a cozy culture that's creating consumer young adults and college students. They're looking for what's the experience that's going to satisfy me. Obviously, I think for almost all of us as leaders, we want to see people who are really disciples, who are empowered and who feel like they can go out and run with what God has given them. That's our mission as an organization. I think most of you guys who are young adult college ministry leaders, that's your heart. Here's the reality, though, is most of the people you're working with, if they've grown up in the church, they're probably coming from that cozy culture. To move them to the discipling culture, if you start increasing challenge, that's going to drag people down into the stressed culture. We've seen that within Threshing Floor locally here in Fargo. Even several weeks ago, some of the people in our communities were having a conversation about that we talked through this grid, and most of the people in the group, most of whom had grown up in church, and they're basically just looking for something that feels good. This is me being somewhat crass about this, but they said, "Oh, we just need more invitation." Reality is they're being invited week after week to thing after thing, mostly not showing up. And from my perspective, what I'm saying is, no, you need more challenge. You need to start living out what you know. And the temptation is, as a leader, when you start getting pushback like that, is to say, okay, we're going to ramp down the challenge. because people are getting stressed, people are feeling discouraged or frustrated, people are leaving. The reality is what you need to do is actually not decrease the challenge, but increase the invitation.
Yeah.
And that's going to bring you back up towards that discipling culture.
Yeah. I mean, this has been a huge, I remember having a conversation with Chris Cummings over in Galveston. This was like a huge breakthrough for understanding for them as they were moving towards this discipling culture. And it was like this light went on of like, that's why all my people are stressed. And like, and the thing of how to respond to that is as you're increasing the challenge, you realize how you need to ramp up even the invitation to bring them into that discipling culture. And so that graphic right there has been a huge breakthrough for a lot of people, understanding why sometimes they're feeling stressed, pressure, kind of this sense of like discouragement sometimes, understanding that that's natural as they begin to move through.
And here's one other thing to say along those lines is that if your ministry is where the people who are a part of your ministry participating coming week by week, if they're in this quadrant, the cozy consumers quadrant, most likely you and your staff or your volunteers, your leaders are going to be somewhere down here because you are bearing the load of all these people. You're carrying their weight. So the goal is begin moving people towards the discipling culture. Moving back, I was going to ask Andy, what do you think? Let's give a couple examples of, say you're on that trajectory, you're moving towards that discipling culture, bringing up the challenge, people are feeling stressed. What are some of the practical examples of what does it look like to increase invitation in that context?
Well, I think that sometimes what we do is we have kind of set ways of invitation in which we kind of naturally function. Our leadership team meets once a month. I check in with my leaders. Sometimes what we need to do in those high moments is for us to understand that that's what they need and to step the frequency of those things in, right? So maybe you need to get together with your leaders more. Maybe you need to grab an extra lunch throughout the week with a couple people. Maybe you need to walk alongside of them as they're in that kind of season of saying, hey, I want to do this with you. So as you're doing this, there can be that companionship and encouragement to walk alongside them in the midst of it.
Sometimes it could, though, simultaneously, it could look like the opposite of that. It could be saying, hey, we meet weekly or every other week as a leadership team, and we got all this stuff on our agenda, but this is a challenging time. You get scenarios in life where just life around people is challenging. It may look like, hey guys, this week we're going to meet, but we're not going to meet. We're just going to hang out and have a conversation and eat a lunch or go get ice cream or go frolfing or whatever. Sometimes that's what you need to do is say, hey, we're going to throw our agenda out the window because I realize you guys are feeling a lot of challenge right now. And I want to create a space for us to connect and invite and,
that's good.
Recharge.
That's good. So let's jump into kind of the practical stuff. We've been going for a few minutes here.
I'll stop.
So as you think about even like day to day, Ben, using this framework in ministry, what are some ways that you utilize it?
Yeah. One of the most frequently used things for me is when I'm coming to a relationship with someone, whether they're on our leadership team or just in one of our communities or in a DNA group I'm leading, I usually am evaluating in my mind, if I'm coming to a meeting or I'm coming to a conversation with that person, what do they need right now? Do they need high invitation? Do they need me to ramp up the relational side of things, or do they need me to bring some challenge to this? So for example, one of the things this season, we got a couple of our leaders just had their first baby. COVID stuff, just like for everyone's made things a little bit weird. Numbers are down at our community gathering. And I just really felt like as I was going into these last couple months of the year that I needed to prioritize bridging and befriending our people more than I needed to prioritize challenging. So practically what that looks like for me for the next few months is I'm starting out each week saying, all right, God, who are the 3 people you want me to call, text, and a note, get together with, so that I can encourage them and connect with them over the next few months. So for me, it feels like right now, it's like, let's increase invitation.
Yeah.
for our people in general.
Yeah. And I think you can do that. Yeah. Both individually as well as collectively as a group too, like
Yeah.
sometimes teams or small groups of what do they need? I think the second thing I was thinking about as well is it's also, I think we need to understand that Jesus is the perfect example of invitation challenge. We by and large are not, right? We usually will gravitate towards one or the other. I would say most people, invitation maybe is the higher percentage. You get some people that they're all challenged, but there's what I've seen is a lot of people are comfortable with one and really struggle with the other one. And so the people who are love challenge, love moving forward, progress, let's get our people moving, they don't do good at relationships, you know? And the people who love relationships, they're like, I don't want to step on anybody's toes. I don't want to like offend anybody. I don't want to challenge anybody. And so I think there's an important, even for us as leaders, to acknowledge that we, even self-evaluation, that there's going to be one that we do well, that we gravitate towards, and understanding that we're going to have to work pretty hard on the other one.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable for us at times.
Here's the reality. Like, if you want to lead well, if you want to make disciples, you got to have both of these. If you're just befriending people and hanging out and having nice conversations and never dealing with the hard stuff, it's not going to change people's lives. And you read through the Gospels, Jesus consistently challenges his disciples. Sometimes, like the example we mentioned earlier, Peter, sometimes it's very brutal, in your face challenge. Like, you're acting like Satan right now. Stop.
Mm-hmm.
Or, even later with Peter saying, hey, you're going to betray me. And sorry, like, I prayed for you and it's not going to end terribly, but this isn't going to be good, man. But then, right, Jesus, after that, when he shows up after the resurrection, Peter, do you love me? There's some challenge there, but that's also simultaneously an invitation to relationship, saying, all right, Peter, though I challenged you, you failed the challenge. We're not done yet.
Yeah, that's good. Well, let's kind of finish there, Ben. And I think the last thing to think about is, in a practical way, is I would encourage everybody, as you're watching this, whether it's live or recording, in two areas. You personally, what one of the four would you kind of find yourself in, right? Are you kind of in the cozy culture? Are you in the distress culture? Are you in the disciple making culture? But then the group that you're a part of, the ministry you're a part of, where would you naturally find? And then asking yourself, I think, what are the next steps in order to move towards that disciple making culture? Is that increasing challenge? Is that increasing invitation? What does that look like? Any last minute thoughts before we hop off here?
Yeah, just building on that, I think, to reiterate, this is not meant to be a program. It's not like, if you're like, oh man, my ministry needs more challenge, please, I mean, maybe this would be helpful, but I would strongly recommend, don't get up and preach a series on challenge, or invitation and challenge. It may be helpful to teach some of your people about this framework, but I think what is going to be much more effective in the long run is you implementing this in the people, like with the people that God has placed in your sphere of influence, whether that's your leadership team, or maybe it's a couple, other students, if you're a student, or maybe it's, people on staff, if you're on staff at a church. Start with yourself, play around with this, learn it, leverage it, use it. Don't try to launch this as a program, because the organic growth is going to see much more effectiveness than just launching a big thing.
Yeah, that's good. And last thing before we hop off, if you want to talk about this, we'd love to grab a Zoom call with you or a lunch or something, and just kind of talk through the nitty gritty practicals of what this looks like. I know this has been extremely helpful for the churches that we've been coaching and working alongside, and we hope that it's helpful for you today as well. So, well, I think that's it for today. Thanks, Ben, for jumping on this call with us, and we'll see everybody next week.
Have a good weekend, y'all.